Shalom, dear friends. This is Daniel again with Bless Israel Network, and this is another episode of My View as a Jew. I have a question for you. How often do you think God is speaking to us? How often is His heart calling us, do you think? 10% of the time? 50% of the time? 100% of the time? Well, if you're like most people who are believers, I hope that the answer to that question is 100% of the time. Because that's what I believe. I believe God never stops calling, that He is calling us 24/7, even when we're asleep. You know, there are many people that have dreams that are prophetic in nature. So I believe God speaks to us 24/7. But here's second question. How often are we listening? Well, that becomes much more personal. And not only how often are we listening, but how often do we actually understand and recognize that God is speaking to us through situations, through events, and so on. Well, speaking just for myself, an honest answer would be, I am not listening and hearing Him often enough. I need a lot of improvement. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm better than anyone else or worse than anyone else. I may be average or what have you, but I do wish to acknowledge that I don't listen as often as I should. And I need to do better. And maybe you're among those. And if that's the case, I want to share something with you which really spoke to me very profoundly. And maybe it will bless you. The other day, my wife had made plans that she was going to have to go someplace. And it's quite a ways away. Well, before she was going to do that, I had actually made plans, a separate appointment where I needed to go someplace and had an appointment. And it was about an hour's drive from where we live. Well, I goofed up and I took the car, and after I left, I realized that I was an hour off in what time I was supposed to be at the appointment that I had. I was leaving an hour early. So I stopped and I thought to myself, you know, what are you going to do with this extra time that you have? Well, after thinking about it for a few minutes, I thought, you know what? Tomorrow, the day after, my wife has that long drive coming up, and it is a long drive. It's well over 2 hours in each direction. So I thought to myself, you know, I'm going to take the car down to the gas station, and I'm going to put some gas in the car, because my wife really hates going to the gas station. I don't know what it is, if it's just her own thing or it's a woman thing or what, but she doesn't like going to the gas station. So I decided I'll take the car to the gas station, I'll get it filled up, I'll check the tires to make sure that there's plenty of air in the tires, the radiator supply, the windshield wiper supply, get the car all, you know, not spruced up, but ready for the trip that my wife was going to be taking the next day. So I take the car down to the gas station, and I pull it up to where you put the air in the tires and so on, and I put some air in the tires. And then I go to start the car to back away from the air pump, and guess what? I get an indicator on the dashboard, transmission malfunction, and the car doesn't start. So I'm like, oh boy, maybe it's just a fluke, you know, let me wait a couple of minutes, let me pray a little bit, see what happens. So I waited, I prayed, I tried to start the car again, didn't start. So I'm sitting there, and under normal circumstances, the Daniel Kalick that some of you know would have gotten pretty angry, pretty frustrated, and expressed myself in less than appropriate terms about this problem. Well, I heard a voice way down deep in a place that doesn't reveal itself as often as it should. And it basically said, stay calm. Something is going to happen. This situation will get resolved. I thought to myself, okay. Well, no sooner did I have that thought when my phone rang, my cell phone rang. And it was my best friend who lives not far from where we live. And he knew that I was planning to drive south. He didn't know exactly where. And he wanted to find out, or he wanted to let me know rather, that there had been a terrorist attack in Jerusalem. You may have read about it on the news. A Palestinian murdered 3 Israelis, and he was eliminated by the IDF. So he called me to tell me about this. And then, of course, he said, you know, how's everything, blah, blah, blah. And I told him, well, I'm sitting down at the gas station. My car won't start. And he goes, really? And he happens to be very, very good when it comes to automobile problems. So he said, hang on, I'll be down in like 15 minutes. So I thought, wow, praise God. I mean, this phone call came like right after I heard the voice of what obviously must have been the Lord. So 15 minutes later, he's down there. In the meantime, I've called my wife and I've told her, you know, the car won't start. And she responds by saying, have you prayed? You know, this is probably a test. And I said, yes, dear, I have prayed. I understand it probably is a test. So I told her that David, our friend, was on his way down. And she goes, oh, wonderful. So sure enough, he shows up and I tell him what happened. And so he says, well, I don't think it's a mechanical problem. I really don't think it's the transmission itself. It sounds to me like it may be a circuitry issue or an electrical problem or what have you. So, you know, he asked me to pop the hood, disconnect the battery, give it a few minutes, see if it resets. Well, I did that, gave it a few minutes, it didn't start the car. So that didn't resolve the problem. So, you know, he tried a number of things, it didn't work, but he was convinced that it was an electrical problem. But in the meantime, he reminded me, you know, I think you have towing with your insurance plan. Why don't you try to call the towing company? Which of course meant that I would have to wait for the tow truck to show up, which in Israel takes anywhere from 2 hours to 3 hours or more. And then the vehicle would have to be, our car would have to be towed to some place, and there would be charges involved in that, and examining what the issue is and repairing it. You know, a lot of time and a lot of expense is what I was looking straight in the face of. So as I'm sitting there, you know, sort of this all running through my mind, I started calling the towing company and it was busy. And so he said, call them again. I called them again. It was busy. He said, call them again. I called again. It was busy. Busy, busy, busy. I could not get through to the towing company. So I'm basically stuck with a car that doesn't start, sitting at this gas station, and don't know what to do because I can't even get a hold of the towing company. So I'm thinking to myself, you know, God said, don't worry, this is going to be resolved. So suddenly I hear a voice in English, which of course is not common in Israel, but nonetheless a lot of people speak it, but it's not really common. I hear a voice say, hey, do you have a problem with your car? And I turn around, there's a guy standing in the vehicle next to me, and he speaks obviously perfect English. And he says, you know, after I told him what was happening, he says, on the other side of this service station is a service center, and they specialize in electrical issues and what have you. And I thought to myself, wow, he's right. Okay. So I took his advice. I walked across the parking lot and went around the corner behind the station, and yes, the electrical service place was there. And I found the manager who speaks English, And I told him what was going on, and he says, wait 1 minute, I think I may know what it is. And I thought, wow, really? Now, in the meantime, my friend who tried to come and fix the car, he's left because he had things to do, so he just said call him and let him know, how things turned out. So in a few minutes, the manager of the service repair place comes over, and he asked me to tell him what's going on. And I described the situation to him, and I told him that the car wouldn't start, and that the message on the dashboard was that it was a transmission malfunction. He looks at me and he says, no. He says, that's not what it is. He says, 1 minute, let me get underneath your car. So he gets down underneath the car, underneath the engine, and he says, I know what the problem is. I said, really? You figured it out that quickly? He says, yes, I know what the problem is. I says, is this a major problem? He says, no. It's very simple, very inexpensive. I can fix it for you, no problem. And I'm like, Lord, I guess you have been speaking to me. So what happens? He goes back to his shop. He makes a phone call. He says, it'll take about an hour. So there's a coffee shop next door. Go sit and relax, and I will call you when it's fixed. And I'm like, okay. I'm still like not believing this is happening because I'm looking at like towing charges and estimates and major repairs and everything else, and suddenly I'm getting an entirely different analysis of the situation. So I go and I sit at the coffee shop, and less than 30 minutes later, I get a phone call from the manager of the service center, and he says, you can come and get your car. And I'm like, it's fixed? He says, it's fixed. So I walk from the coffee shop over to where he's sitting, or where his shop is, and I said, what happened? I'm reaching in my pocket right now to see if I can find something. That's why you see me fidgeting a little bit. So he says, I'll tell you exactly what it is. And he picks up this, I don't know if you can see this or not, but this little rubbery gasket type thing, all right? And he says, this is the problem. I said, what is it? He says, it's a little coupling that connects to a cable that does connect to your transmission. And he says, it went bad, it needs replacing. I said, fine. How much? Total for parts, labor, and everything, 145 shekels, which in US dollars translates to about 40 US dollars. So I'm just shaking my head and I'm going, thank you, Lord, from what appeared to be a disaster, which was going to be extremely expensive, turned out to be the very slightest of problems, which was fixed in less than 30 minutes. And instead of hundreds and hundreds of dollars, it cost me about 40 US dollars to get it fixed. And so I am just sharing this with you because I looked at all these things that happened. Why did I have that extra hour before my scheduled appointment? Was God speaking to me? Did He give me that extra hour? Secondly, did He tell me to go to the gas station and do these things that get the car ready for my wife to use it the next day? And just think, if I hadn't gone down to the gas station and I actually left and went to my appointment, which was over an hour away, I would have been stuck because my friend would not have come down. The guy next to me would not have been there to said, you know, there's a station right behind you, a place that works on cars. I mean, all of these sequence of events, when you think about it, never would have happened if the car didn't break down at the service station that I was at. So, excuse me, I think to myself, how often does God speak? Well, I think we're all in agreement that God speaks all the time. But the real question is, how often are we listening? And how often do we recognize when God intervenes? And in this particular case, there is no question in my mind that God was right there every step of the way. He directed me to leave an hour early. He directed me to go to that station and get the car prepped for my wife to use it the next day. He caused the problem to happen right there at the station. He caused the phone for the towing company to be busy so I couldn't get to them and spend a bunch of money having the car towed away. He caused the guy who spoke English to say there's a service station right behind the gas station that specializes in electrical issues. He found the perfect guy who manages the place, who speaks English, who says, I know exactly what the problem is, and it'll be fixed in less than an hour. It was fixed in 30 minutes, and it cost me $40 total. The car is now running just like it should. My friends, I hope this inspires you, because it has lifted me, it has raised my spirits, it has told me that I need to remind myself more than I do and be in tune with the Lord when He is speaking to me. And I hope that this encourages you to listen more often and try to get yourself out of the way, because if there's one thing that gets in the way of the Lord speaking to you, it's you. It's yourself. It's your pride. It's your ego. It's what you want. It's your plans. And this is exactly what I am guilty of. And so this is a lesson which I hope helps not just me, but helps you listen to the Lord more often in your life. God bless you. I hope you've enjoyed this message, and if this has blessed you, please feel free to go to our website, www.blessedisraelnetwork.com, and make a donation to our ministry. God bless you for now.